So in lesson 2.5, we have been working with operations with rational numbers. So what I've done in this video is I've broken it down between addition and subtraction. We'll go through examples of that first, and then we'll go on to multiplication and division. Remember, if we talk about adding and subtracting rational numbers, that's really just a fancy word for adding and subtracting with fractions. Our fraction could be positive and negative fractions. So if we look at our very first example, we have addition here. We have two fractions, but notice in those fractions, one is negative and one's positive. We will work with that in a moment. Very first thing we're going to do is we have to find a common denominator. Anytime you add or subtract with fractions, you always have to find a common denominator. And you've been doing this since about fourth grade. So if you look at our denominators, 3 and 4, our common denominator would be 12. So I would rewrite our problems with a denominator, or rewrite our fractions with a denominator of 12. Then we have to determine what did we multiply those denominators by so that we can now make equivalent fractions. So if you start with our first fraction, we multiply 3 times 4 in order to get 12. So now I have to multiply the numerator by the exact same amount. So negative 8 times 4 gives me a negative 32. If you look at your second fraction, you have to ask yourself 4 times what equals 12, which is 3. So now multiply your numerator by that. So 1 times 3 equals 3. Now is when we need to pay attention to our negatives. Notice we have a positive and negative. If we have a positive and negative, we need to actually subtract. So 32 minus 3 is going to leave us with 29 over 12. Denominator stays the same. 32 is larger, it was negative, so this has to be a negative 29 over 12. Notice we have an improper fraction. So now we need to change it into a mixed number. Remember, a fraction bar means division. So you have to determine how many times 12 can go into 29 without going over. The answer to that would be 2. 2 times 12 is 24. We had 29. So we need to subtract to determine how much is left. 29 minus 24 leaves us with 5. Denominator stays the same. And do not forget to bring your negative over to the answer. So our final answer would be negative 2 and 5/12. Let's look at our next example. Next example, 2 fractions or 2 rational numbers again. But notice this time we have subtraction. We're going to start the same way we did the last problem. Look at your denominators, 4 and 2, and we need to find a common denominator. That, of course, is going to be 4. So I would rewrite my fractions with denominators of 4. Notice the first fraction. Our denominator stays the same, so our numerator is also going to remain the same. So bring your 3 down, bring your negative down as well. For the second fraction, determine what do you multiply 2 by to get a denominator of 4, and we know that that is 2. So now you're going to take negative 1, our numerator, times 2, and that gives us negative 2. From here, my next step would be to clean up our signs a little bit. So remember when we were working with subtraction of integers, we were using the property of add op, or addition opposite. We can still use that. Anytime there's subtraction, you can still do add up. So I would change subtraction to addition and take the opposite of the following number. So the opposite of negative 2 is positive 2. Now look at your signs. You have a negative and a positive rational number. Positive and negative, you're going to subtract. So 3 minus 2 is 1. Denominator stays the same. And you're going to take the sign of the larger number, which is a negative. So negative 1/4 is our answer. Moving on to the second part of lesson 2.5, we worked with multiplication and division of rational numbers, or multiplication and division of fractions. We said we liked these better because the work didn't take as long. It wasn't as tedious. We don't have to find common denominators when we multiply and divide with fractions. So let's look at our first example. Negative 3/4 times 5/12. Remember, for multiplication and division only, you can use the shortcut. You can actually simplify first before you multiply or divide. So in this case, we need to look for two numbers that share common factors. And those two numbers, one has to be the numerator, one has to be the denominator. So what we could do is we could work with 3 and 12. 3 is a common factor of both 3 and 12. So 3 goes into 3 once, 3 goes into 12 4 times. Notice now we have two 4s. Yes, 4s are a common factor of each other, but in this example, we can't cross those out because the 4s are both in the denominator. So now we just have to multiply across. So 1 times 5 in my numerators will give me 5, and then the denominator 4 times 4 is 16. Now don't forget to look at your signs. You have a negative times a positive, which is going to give you a negative rational number. So negative 5/16 is our answer. Look at the next example. This time we have two mixed numbers. So what we've said in class is if you have a mixed number, you have to make them improper first. So if we look at our first mixed number, 2 2/3, we would do 3 times 2, which is 6, and then 6 plus the numerator 2 would give me 8. So this will give me a negative 8/3. Drop down your multiplication sign. Now negative 3 3/4. I do 4 times 3 is 12. 12 plus 3 gives me 15 over 4. And again, this was negative as well, so don't forget to drop that down. Now we want to look and see if we have any common factors. 3 and 15 can both be divided by 3. So 3 goes into 3 once, 3 goes into 15 5 times. 4 and 8 have a common factor of 4. 4 goes into 4 once, 4 goes into 8 2 times. Now multiply your numerators. 2 times 5 is 10. Multiply your denominators. 1 times 1 is 1. Look at your signs. Negative times a negative is a positive. We're not done yet. If you notice, we have 10 over 1. Well, that's not simplified. 10 divided by 1 is just simply 10. So positive 10 should be our final answer. Last type of example. Let's look at division. Remember in class that we said we don't actually divide fractions. What we do is we multiply by the reciprocal of the second fraction. So I would start by rewriting this. My first fraction stays exactly the same. Division becomes multiplication. Take the reciprocal of the second fraction. So negative 5/18 will turn into negative 18/5. Now we work through this exactly like we did in the previous examples. Look for a common factor to use the shortcut. So 6 and 18 can both be divided by 6. 6 goes into 6 once. 6 goes into 18 3 times. Now multiply your numerators. 1 times 3 is 3. Multiply your denominators. 1 times 5 is 5. Now remember to look at your signs. A negative times a negative is a positive. So my answer would be positive 3/5. Last example. Division with mixed numbers. So again, with mixed numbers, we said we have to make them improper fractions. But with division, there's an extra step that we have to remember to catch. So let's start with the first mixed number. Negative 2 3/4, make it improper. So 4 times 2 is 8. 8 plus 3 is 11. So this will give us negative 11/4. Change division to multiplication. Make our second mixed number improper. So 8 times 1 is 8, plus 3 is 11. So that would give you negative 11/8. However, we have to remember, because this is division, we have to take the reciprocal of that second mixed number or second fraction. So now I would rewrite my problem negative 8/11. Finally, we can use the shortcut. So 11 and 11 will cancel each other out. 4 can go into both 4 and 8. So 4 divided by 4 is 1. 4 or 8 divided by 4 is 2. Multiply your numerators. 1 times 2. Multiply your denominators. 1 times 1. Look at your signs, negative times a negative, so that equals a positive. And then finally, if you look, our fraction can be simplified to a whole number. +2 is our answer.